Dan, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey, Kara, how are you today? My name's Dan Herdman, as you said. I'm with Stewart Title here in the Pittsburgh office in Western Pennsylvania. I manage the operations and business development for Stewart.
So why don't you give us a little bit of backstory and how did you get into the title industry?
How I got into the title industry is probably about how half of us in the Pittsburgh area got into the title industry, and that was working for a company known as Lenders Service, LSI, based out in Moon Township, Coriopolis. I started working there back in 2000, was there from about 2000 to 2006. I was actually in the appraisal division at that time. Lender Service, as a lot of people know, is a large title and appraisal company that did a lot of work for the retail lenders in that space. And I worked there for 6 years and then, parlayed that into other opportunities.
What is your role within Stewart Title and what markets do you serve?
As the agency services manager for Western Pennsylvania, I primarily serve the Western Pennsylvania market, Pittsburgh, Erie, heading all the way over to the Harrisburg area. I have some agents in the Lancaster area as well. We also have a Philadelphia area office. It's funny, if I look at the map and I cover half the state rather than covering it's kind of like a triangle going from Pittsburgh up to Erie, down through State College, Harrisburg, over to Lancaster, and then back over. I'll service the agents anywhere within Pennsylvania that, that I have a relationship with. And my responsibility is basically just to make sure our agents are supported in an operational capacity. And from a business development perspective, it's always looking for agents who need a top tier underwriter to support them.
Is Stewart available across the country or are they regional?
Stewart is one of the big four. So there's four major underwriters that are national, and Stewart is one of the four. Yes.
Great. Do you enjoy most about working on this side of the real estate world?
To be honest, after having been a realtor who, spent a lot of time in the car, a lot of time licking envelopes, a lot of time going to, neighborhood events and things like that. What I appreciate on this side of the transaction is now my clients are other business professionals. So rather than being consumer facing, I'm business to business, and it's less transactional. So rather than trying to get one deal from one homeowner and hoping that they like me enough to refer me, I'll now develop a relationship with an agent like Stalwart Abstract, who I've been working with for almost 10 years now. At my prior underwriter, I had worked with them. And, I just really value having those collaborative relationships with other business professionals.
What is something that most people don't realize about the title business?
I mean, most people don't know what title is. I know when I started as a realtor, we're going over the closing statement, and this was before the closing disclosures that we're using now that came out, due to TRID in 2014. We're going through the closing disclosure, and you look at it, and you go down the line, you look at all the costs for everything, and then you see title, and it's this several $1,000 charge. And, you immediately go, what the heck is that? And the first person told me, oh, that's just something everybody needs. You don't need to worry about that. Knowing what I know now, what I would have said to me those years ago, I said, well, you have to understand what title is. And title is the historical chain of events relating to a specific property going backwards in time. So every time that property was transferred, every time it was bought or sold, anytime there were any easements on it, anytime there was any work done to it, any family drama that may have arisen with the people living in the home at the time, that is all part of the chain of title. And each one of those examples of an event I just gave you, you could visualize as a link in that chain. And what we do as title professionals is when you engage with your title agent, they're going to search that chain of title. They're going to make sure all the links are attached so that that ownership chain can, go unbroken all the way until the transaction now. So the person accepting the property knows that they have full enjoyment of that property. And then the cost insurance policy that is issued to that chain of title, in case there were any unknown heir, any types of activity that were not in public records that attached to that property, that insurance policy backs up the search.
Outside of work, is there anything that fun that keeps you busy?
I've been doing that for 20 years, working on getting my black belt here, hopefully within the next year or two. Beyond that, I like hiking, biking,
Nice.
usual middle-aged guy stuff.
How do you define the real value of title in a transaction beyond it just being required?
Again, it tells the story of the property. You're purchasing, a home is the biggest purchase that most of us are going to make at any time. And, there's a whole host of legal ramifications there. And what title insurance does is it goes in and it untangles all that. And again, if we visualize the chain again, you're taking this big pile of stuff and you're stretching it out to make sure there's a clear line and that nothing is broken, so that when you go to closing and you're signing your name and you're taking out that $300,000 mortgage, that you're protected and that you truly own that property.
What's misunderstood about the role that title plays in protecting lenders and agents?
You know, a lot of times people don't necessarily appreciate that there was an insurance policy issued. They understand that you're going out and you're searching everything, and they see that chain is untangled and unbroken, and then they wonder, well, wait, why am I paying thousands of dollars for a policy against that? And again, that's just because public records are not infallible. um, title title insurance protects against forgery. It protects against unknown heirs. It
Right.
protects against, the local government coming in and saying, hey, we want to take away a portion of your front yard for sidewalks, anything like that.
So I guess from contract to closing, where does title have the biggest impact?
I mean, again, the impact falls on making sure all the T's are crossed and all the I's are dotted, right? We know what the lender's doing. You guys are lending the money. You're making sure that's all taken care of. We know what the realtor's doing. They're helping you find the house, making sure that dye test gets done, all that stuff. The title agent's doing everything else. All the
Mm.
paperwork in the background, all the money at the end, all the disbursement. The title agent is the one who's making sure that all the back taxes are paid, all the utilities are paid. They're making sure that the bank is paid. They're making sure that the agent gets their commission. So in addition to providing all the legal paperwork that's being done, they're also handling all the money.
I guess what information should loan officers surface earlier to avoid last minute problems? And I think the
That's
same thing goes with realtors too.
with the realtors as well. And really the key here is collaboration, right? We're talking about three legs of a tripod, the lender, the realtor, and the title agent. And the key is clear communication. Get that title search ordered ASAP. Because again, the title search is going to be what tells the initial story. That title search might come back and it might look clean and we got everything easy and we can close in a matter of a couple of days. Other times that title is going to come back and oh boy, we got missing heirs, we got powers of attorney, we got mechanics liens, we got transfers and all kinds of things. So get that title search ordered early. From the realtor's perspective as well, you're the ones who are oftentimes facing the consumer. If they talk about any type of, if there's a power of attorney or if there's family drama and there's things that are going to have to be addressed there, I know that's kind of messy and uncomfortable, but that stuff's going to have to be dealt with before the
Sure.
deal can be closed on. So if you kick that can down the road, that will definitely cause delays on the back end. Deal with that stuff up front.
Can you give us any insight on how title insurance might affect HELOCs or like judgments and liens and
Mhm.
maybe some estate probate situations, that sort of thing?
So when you think of HELOC, typically, oftentimes lenders aren't going to necessarily require title insurance on that. Usually the title insurance is going to be required on purchases and refinances. Occasionally a lender might ask for a title search done on a HELOC, but they're probably not going to issue a policy against it because usually there's already a policy for the first mortgage. And then, they would be taking position well after that in any event. As far as the liens and encumbrances and things like that, that's all what we're finding out. And if the search turns up that there's liens and encumbrances, then that's when the agent is going to start working to clear those items. It may be a situation where they need an affidavit signed by the current owner. It may be a situation where the current owner needs to go pay something. Maybe a situation where they're going to have to escrow some money for the buyer to pay something. There's a lot of different ways to address the issues, and
Mhm.
some of that is negotiable, some of that is not, but that's where the rubber really meets the road, is once that search comes back. That's when all the curative work begins. That's where my team will also step in. We employ underwriting attorneys who then our title agents can then consult with to make sure that they're doing everything legally and on the up and up.
So I guess what separates a smooth realtor title relationship from a stressful one?
Communication and understanding. Again, as a realtor, educate yourself. As a loan officer, educate yourself. You see these continuing education classes and you think of that as something that you just have to take. That's an opportunity for you to learn about the industry. And the loan officers and the realtors who I have found are the most effective are the ones who truly understand every part of the transaction. If one third of the transaction is a black hole to you where you're just depending on other people, you better have a really good title agent like Stalwart that you can count on, because all title agents are not created equally. It's good for you as an agent or a lender to at least have a rudimentary understanding of the title process so that you can speak from a collaborative place of knowledge.
Title related, I guess like maybe red flags should realtors look out for or try to catch early?
If there's powers of attorneys, if there's divorce decrees, if there's, multiple heirs, again, all of that stuff can create drama for the transaction. Look, when it comes to public records and things of that, that's business, that's cut, that's dry. But when you're involving family, now personalities and feelings get involved, and that's not the favorite part of any transaction that we all have to deal with. But that, again, is part of being a consumer facing industry. And if you're a realtor, if you're a loan officer, you have to address those uncomfortable situations sooner rather than later.
How does title ultimately protect an agent's income and paycheck in the end?
Question, since because that's one that I had when I was an agent. First off, the title agent is handling all the money,
Yeah.
all of it. They're making sure that the the lender is getting their big chunk. They're making sure the other prior mortgage is paid off. They're making sure you, as the realtor, are getting your commission check. They're going to make sure that all the taxes and everything else is paid. So, from the realtor's perspective, you just want to make sure that you get all the paperwork to the agents. You want to make sure that if you have any questions about any of the affidavits or any of the statements that need signed, have a conversation, because a good agent will be able to explain all of that to you.
Are you seeing specific fraud trends right now? And what does that really look like to the realtor, to the lender?
I'm glad you asked that, because fraud is absolutely one of the biggest concerns in our industry, and one of the most important tasks that we are assigned as title agents is to help mitigate fraud risk. And there's a variety of best practices that can be implemented to avoid all types of fraud, but the two major types of fraud that we're seeing by far and away, number one being wire fraud.
Mhm.
Absolutely, absolutely far and away number one, wire fraud. Let me say that again. Wire fraud is absolutely the number one biggest concern.
Heard.
and and what happens is bad actors will hack into the email address of either a realtor, a lender, or the title agent. If you're a realtor who uses your personal email address, probably been hacked already. That is the weakest spot for fraud in the entire chain, because you don't have your corporate protection there. So it's a
Mhm.
lot easier to hack into a Gmail or a Verizon or a Hotmail account. And what happens is these fraudsters will hack in and then they just wait. They just watch and they follow along with a transaction the whole time. And then the day of closing, they will then send an email from either the title agent's email address or from the lender or from whoever, but they'll send a message to the title agent saying, hey, the account number that I gave you is different. We need to switch something. And then next thing you know, money is getting transferred to the wrong account.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll see a lot of times in realtors email, or excuse me, in title agents emails at the bottom, they'll say, stop, read this, we do not accept wire changes via email. It either needs to be done via phone or in person. And really, you even have to be careful with phone now with AI and spoofing of people's voices and things of that
Crazy.
nature. In a vacant land fraud situation, you're driving around the city, you see these pieces of land that have been sitting there for sale forever. And what happened is a bad actor will pretend that they're the seller and they'll initiate a transaction and they'll set up a shell LLC. And because the property's been sitting there for so long without any activity going on, it's a lot easier for that to fly under the radar because it doesn't, people don't remember who was originally listing that or whatever. And a lot of times, they'll look for realtors who are like newer, maybe aren't doing as much business, who will jump on that and say, oh yeah, this sounds legit to me. So always be cautious about that, but also understand this is where your title agent is backing you up.
What verification protocols should every team be using when it comes to fraud and title?
That's a great question. Whenever possible, meet your clients in person. I know that's not always possible in today's, world of everything online, but
Sure.
hop on a Teams meeting at least. Obviously, when it comes time to close, we're going to verify photo ID and things of that
Right.
nature, but get the process going before that. Check some ID, get some FaceTime with those people before then. Keep an eye out for red flags. Anytime somebody says something is a super major rush, we got to do this right now. That's always a hint to step back, slow down just for a second,
Yeah. Yeah.
and make sure you're double checking everything. Rush requests, always a red flag. That's not to say that it's always an issue, but you should always be taking an extra second to look.
In a competitive or maybe a slower market like we've been in and are in, how can title help professionals win more deals?
Great question. When you're dealing with your title agent, you want to make sure they're not wasting your time. Like, you want to make sure they know what they're doing. When you're fighting for every deal and speed is of the essence, you know, get the title search ordered as soon as possible. Get it to a title agent who's going to jump right on that. Get it to a title agent who knows what they're doing so that you don't have embarrassing issues come up that are going to reflect negatively on you and your knowledge. Because again, the consumer's not facing the title agent. They're not talking to the title agent as much. They're talking
Right.
to you as the realtor or the lender. So it's imperative that you're working with a title agent that you have clear communication with, that knows your processes, which, when I think of Victorian Finance and Stalwart Abstract, that's a perfect example. Stalwart Abstract is set up specifically to service Victorian Finance. So they know all the policies, all the processes. That's invaluable.
What is one thing that realtors should stop doing in terms of title insurance?
Stop telling your buyers that it's just something they need and not to worry about it. Again, educate yourself. You don't need to be an expert in all things. Lean on the experts that you have. If you're working with Stalwart, I know that they have access to a lot of great educational material that we've provided that will explain specifically to consumers what is title insurance. Why do you need title insurance? It'll explain the story of how Abraham Lincoln lost his home twice due to title issues. So, there's a lot of good information out there to be shared.